The fluorescent lights of the overnight gas station buzzed like angry wasps above Marcus Thompson's head as he restocked the energy drink cooler for what felt like the 1,000th time that month. The digital clock on the register read 3:47 a.m., and his shift wouldn't end for another 3 hours. His back ached from hunching over spreadsheets at his day job as a data entry clerk, and now his legs were starting to cramp from standing for 6 straight hours. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a slight smudge on his thick-rimmed glasses. At 28, he looked older than his years. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've been carrying the weight of the world since you were 16. His dark skin had a greyish pallor under the harsh lighting, and his usually neat beard was slightly unkempt from the long day. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Rodriguez from his neighborhood shuffled in, her house slippers making soft sounds against the linoleum floor. She was one of the regulars who knew his story, knew why he worked 2 jobs while most people his age were building careers or starting families. "Mijo," she said softly, using the Spanish term of endearment she'd called him since he was a teenager. "You look tired. How's your mama doing?" Marcus managed a weak smile. Mrs. Rodriguez had been their neighbor for 15 years, had watched him grow up in the small duplex on Detroit's east side. She'd seen him walk to school with holes in his shoes, seen him take on adult responsibilities when his father walked out, leaving nothing but empty beer bottles and unpaid bills. "She's hanging in there," Marcus replied, though they both knew it was more complicated than that. His mother, Diane, had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 3 years ago, and the medication costs were eating through their savings faster than he could replenish them. Even with her part-time job at the local library, they were always one emergency away from financial disaster. Mrs. Rodriguez selected a carton of milk and some bread, but Marcus noticed her glancing at him with concern. "You know, my nephew Carlos works at Ford. He says they're always looking for good people in their IT department. You have that computer degree." "Community college certificate," Marcus corrected gently. "And I've applied everywhere, Mrs. Rodriguez. Trust me, I've tried." He rang up her items, his fingers moving automatically across the register keys. "Most places want 4-year degrees now, or they want experience I can't get because I'm working these jobs to keep the lights on." The older woman nodded sympathetically and handed him, "Exact change. Keep trying, mijo. Something good will come your way. I can feel it." As she left, Marcus wondered if her optimism was misplaced. He'd been keeping trying for over a decade now, ever since his father disappeared when Marcus was 17. David Thompson had been a mechanic with big dreams and bigger gambling debts. One Tuesday morning, Marcus woke up to find a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. Take care of your mother. You're the man of the house now." And so, that was 11 years ago, and Marcus had been the man of the house ever since. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of coffee refills for truck drivers and lottery ticket sales to insomniacs chasing impossible dreams. By the time 7 a.m. rolled around, Marcus felt like he was moving through thick fog. He clocked out, grabbed his worn backpack, and stepped into the crisp October morning air. Detroit in the fall had its own kind of beauty, even in the neighborhoods that had seen better days. The maple trees lining his street were turning brilliant shades of orange and red, and the morning light cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Marcus had walked this route hundreds of times, from the gas station to the bus stop, then home to grab a few hours of sleep before his afternoon shift at Davidson and Associates, a small accounting firm where he spent his days entering numbers into spreadsheets and filing tax documents. The bus was nearly empty at this hour, filled mostly with other night shift workers heading home and early rising janitors heading to office buildings downtown. Marcus found a seat near the back and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind was already racing ahead to the day's responsibilities, picking up his mother's prescription refill, paying the electric bill that was overdue, and somehow finding energy to submit more job applications when he got home. As the bus rumbled through the streets of Detroit, Marcus stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods. Some blocks showed signs of the city's slow recovery: new businesses, renovated homes, young professionals moving into areas that had been abandoned just a few years earlier. Other blocks looked like time had stopped in 2008, with boarded-up houses and empty lots where families used to live. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Morning, honey. Don't forget I have my doctor's appointment at 2. Love you." Marcus sighed and typed back, "I'll pick you up at 1:30. How are you feeling?" "Better today. Thank you for everything you do." The message made his chest tight with a mixture of love and frustration. His mother always thanked him, always apologized for being a burden, but she could never understand that taking care of her wasn't a burden. It was just his life. It was the only life he'd known since his father left. The bus pulled up to his stop, and Marcus gathered his things. The walk to his house took him past Lincoln Elementary, where he'd gone to school as a kid. A group of children was playing on the playground before classes started, their laughter echoing off the brick building. Marcus remembered being their age, remembered believing that growing up meant having choices, meant being able to do whatever you wanted. He unlocked the front door of the duplex he shared with his mother and was greeted by the smell of coffee and the sound of morning news on the small television in the living room. The house was modest but clean, with furniture that had seen better decades and family photos covering every available surface. Most of the photos were of Marcus and his mother, school graduations, birthdays, holiday dinners for 2. There were a few pictures of his father from before he left, but they'd been relegated to less prominent spots over the years. "Marcus, that you, baby?" his mother called from the kitchen. "Yeah, Mom, I'm home." He found her sitting at the small kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her and her morning medication arranged in a small plastic container. At 52, Diane Thompson still had the kind of beauty that made people turn their heads, but the years of worry and financial stress had added lines around her eyes and grey to her hair that made her look older than she was. "How was work?" she asked. The same question she asked every morning when he came home from his overnight shift. "Fine," Marcus replied, the same answer he always gave. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "How are you feeling today?" "Good. Really good. I think this new dosage is helping." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Marcus, I know this isn't the life you planned." "Mom, don't." He gently squeezed her hand back. "We're doing fine. We're making it work." But even as he said it, Marcus felt the familiar weight settling on his chest. They weren't just making it work. They were barely surviving. Every month was a careful calculation of which bills could be paid and which could be delayed. Every unexpected expense, from car repairs to medical co-pays, meant eating ramen noodles for dinner and skipping meals when his mother wasn't looking. "I'm going to get a few hours of sleep," Marcus said, finishing his coffee. "I'll pick you up for your appointment at 1:30, okay?" His mother nodded and watched him head toward the stairs. "Marcus?" He turned back. "I'm proud of you. I know your father would be too." Marcus managed a smile. "Thanks, Mom. Try to take it easy today." In his bedroom, Marcus collapsed onto his bed without bothering to change out of his work clothes. The room was small and cluttered with the remnants of his abbreviated college years. Textbooks he couldn't afford to buy new, a desk covered with old assignment papers, and a laptop that was held together with electrical tape and determination. As he stared at the ceiling, Marcus allowed himself a few minutes to imagine a different life. A life where he worked one job that paid enough to support both of them comfortably. A life where he could afford to take his mother to nice restaurants or go on vacation somewhere warm. A life where he wasn't constantly exhausted, constantly calculating, constantly one crisis away from losing everything they had. But imagination was a luxury he couldn't afford for long. He had 4 hours to sleep before his afternoon shift, and then another long night ahead of him. As he finally drifted off, Marcus had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he never could have expected, and that the truth about his past would shake everything he thought he knew about his journey. The last thing he remembered before sleep took him was the sound of his mother moving around downstairs, humming softly to herself as she prepared for another day. It was a sound that had comforted him for years, a reminder that no matter how hard things got, they still had each other. He had no way of knowing that soon he would discover that the very person whose humming had always soothed him had been the architect of some of his greatest struggles. 3 weeks later, Marcus was hunched over his desk at Davidson and Associates, entering invoice data with the mechanical precision that comes from doing the same task thousands of times. The accounting firm occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse in downtown Detroit, and the November afternoon light was already fading through the tall windows. His supervisor, Janet Walsh, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who rarely smiled, but had always been fair to Marcus, understanding when he needed to leave early for his mother's medical appointments. "Thompson," Janet called from her office. "Can you come in here for a minute?" Marcus saved his work and walked over, wondering if he'd made an error in one of the files. Janet's office was small and efficient, with stacks of client folders organized with military precision and a motivational poster that read, "Excellence is not a skill, it's an attitude." "Sit down," Janet said, closing the door behind him. Her expression was unreadable, which made Marcus's stomach clench with worry. Had someone complained about his overnight job affecting his daytime performance? Had he made a mistake that cost the firm money? "Marcus, how long have you been working here?" Janet asked, settling into her chair. "Almost 3 years," he replied carefully. "And in that time, you've never been late, never called in sick, and your work is consistently accurate." She paused, studying him. "But I also know you're working nights at that gas station, and I can see you're exhausted. That's not sustainable, son." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I know it's not ideal, but I need both jobs to make ends meet. I promise it's not affecting my work here." Janet held up a hand. "Relax, you're not in trouble. Actually, I want to talk to you about an opportunity." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "Are you familiar with Meridian Technologies?" Marcus nodded. Meridian was a mid-sized software company that had been growing rapidly, one of the success stories of Detroit's tech renaissance. Their headquarters was in the renovated downtown area, in a gleaming building that Marcus passed on the bus, but never imagined he'd have reason to enter. "They're looking for a junior data analyst," Janet continued. "The position requires someone with database management skills, attention to detail, and the ability to work with financial data. The starting salary is $58,000 a year, plus benefits." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. $58,000 was more than he made at both his jobs combined. "That sounds amazing, but Janet, I don't have a 4-year degree. Most tech companies won't even look at my resume." "That's where it gets interesting." Janet opened the folder and pulled out a printed email. "Their hiring manager, a woman named Sarah Chen, reached out to me directly. Apparently, someone recommended you specifically for this position. They want to interview you next week." "Someone recommended me?" Marcus felt confused. "Who would recommend me? I don't know anyone at Meridian." Janet shrugged. "The email doesn't say, but whoever it was must have some influence there because they're willing to waive the degree requirement and focus on your skills and experience." She handed him the email. "Sarah Chen wants to meet with you this Friday at 2 p.m. Marcus stared at the email, reading it twice to make sure he wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. The letterhead was official, the tone professional but encouraging. They wanted to discuss his unique background and potential fit for their growing team. "I don't understand," Marcus said finally. "I've never applied to Meridian. I've never even submitted my resume to them." "Well, someone did it for you," Janet said with the first smile Marcus had seen from her in months. "And honestly, Marcus, this is the break you've been waiting for. You're wasted here doing data entry. You have the skills for this job, and more importantly, you have the character. Don't overthink it. Just go to the interview and show them what you're made of." Marcus left work that day in a daze. On the bus ride home, he kept rereading the email, trying to figure out who could have possibly recommended him. His mother knew he was smart with computers, but she didn't have connections in the tech industry. Mrs. Rodriguez was supportive, but her nephew Carlos worked in manufacturing, not software. He couldn't think of anyone in his life who had the kind of influence to get him an interview at a company like Meridian. When he got home, his mother was in the living room folding laundry and watching the local news. The anchor was discussing the city's economic recovery, highlighting new businesses and job growth in the tech sector. "Mom," Marcus said, sitting down on the couch beside her, "something strange happened today." He told her about the interview opportunity, watching her face light up with excitement and pride. "Oh, Marcus, this is wonderful!" Diane set down the shirt she was folding and turned to face him fully. "I always knew something good would happen for you. You've worked so hard, baby. You deserve this chance. But that's the thing, Mom. Someone recommended me and I have no idea who. The hiring manager won't say who put in a good word for me." He studied his mother's face. "You don't know anyone at Meridian Technologies, do you?" Diane shook her head, but something flickered across her expression, so quickly that Marcus almost missed it. "No, honey, I don't know anyone there. But maybe it's someone from your old school, or someone you helped at the gas station." It was possible, Marcus supposed. He'd gone out of his way to help customers over the years, especially elderly people having trouble with the credit card machines or tourists looking for directions. Maybe someone had remembered his kindness and wanted to pay it forward. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus spent his free time researching Meridian Technologies, learning about their products and recent projects. He practiced interview questions in the mirror, bought a new tie with money he couldn't really afford to spend, and even got a haircut from his mother's friend, who did hair in her kitchen for $20. On Friday morning, Marcus called in sick to his overnight job for the first time in 2 years. He felt guilty about lying, but this interview could change everything for him and his mother. He spent the morning reviewing his notes and trying to calm his nerves. The Meridian building was even more impressive up close. The lobby had soaring ceilings, modern art on the walls, and a receptionist who looked like she belonged in a magazine. Marcus gave his name and was directed to the 10th floor, where he sat in a sleek waiting area, trying not to fidget with his tie. Marcus Thompson. A woman appeared beside him, Asian, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "I'm Sarah Chen. Thank you for coming in today." Sarah's office had a view of the Detroit River, and Marcus tried not to gawk at the cityscape as they settled into chairs around a small conference table. "So, Marcus," Sarah began, opening a folder with his resume inside. "Tell me about your background." The interview went better than Marcus had dared to hope. Sarah was impressed with his database management skills, his attention to detail, and his ability to work under pressure. She seemed particularly interested in his experience handling financial data at the accounting firm. "I have to ask," Marcus said when Sarah asked if he had any questions, "who recommended me for this position? I'm grateful, obviously, but I'm curious about how my name came up." Sarah's expression became slightly guarded. "I'm not at liberty to share that information. I can tell you that someone who knows your work ethic and character very well reached out to us. They spoke very highly of your potential and your dedication to your family." After the interview, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic. Sarah had walked him through the benefits package, health insurance that would cover his mother's medications, 2 weeks of paid vacation, and opportunities for professional development. It seemed too good to be true. He was waiting for the elevator when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Marcus? Marcus Thompson." He turned to see a woman about his age approaching with a wide smile. She had short blonde hair and was wearing the kind of business attire that screamed successful professional. It took Marcus a moment to place her. "Ashley Williams," she said, extending her hand. "We went to Lincoln High together. I was in your AP computer science class senior year." "Ashley, wow." Marcus shook her hand, memories flooding back. Ashley had been one of the popular kids, student council president, headed to University of Michigan on a full scholarship. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," she said, gesturing around the lobby. "I'm a senior developer on the financial systems team. What about you? Please don't tell me you're here about the security job. You're way too smart for that." "Actually, I just interviewed for the junior data analyst position," Marcus said, feeling slightly embarrassed about the disparity in their job levels. Ashley's face lit up. "That's fantastic. Sarah Chen is great to work for, very fair, very supportive of her team." She paused, studying his face. "You know, it's funny. When I saw your resume come across Sarah's desk, I was so excited. I told her you were one of the smartest people in our graduating class." Marcus felt his heart skip. "You recommended me?" "Well, not exactly recommended. Sarah already had your resume, and she was planning to interview you anyway. But when I saw your name, I definitely put in a good word." Ashley tilted her head. "Wait, didn't you know that someone had submitted your resume? I assumed you'd applied through our website." "No," Marcus said slowly. "I had no idea my resume was even here until Janet at my current job told me about the interview. Someone submitted it without telling me." Ashley looked genuinely puzzled. "That's unusual. Our hiring system requires the applicant to submit their own materials and create an account. Someone would have needed your personal information, your work history, everything." She paused. "Maybe a family member or a close friend who thought they were helping?" As Marcus rode the bus home, Ashley's words echoed in his mind. Someone with access to his personal information had submitted his resume to Meridian, someone who knew his work, history, his skills, his financial situation, someone who cared enough about his future to take action without telling him. But who? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and when it did, it would unravel everything Marcus thought he knew about his life, his struggles, and the people closest to him. The truth had been hidden for years, carefully concealed by someone who claimed to love him, but had been systematically sabotaging his chances at a better life. And the revelation would start with a simple mistake, a piece of mail delivered to the wrong address, containing information that would change everything. Marcus got the job. The call came on Monday afternoon while he was restocking shelves at the gas station. Sarah Chen's voice was warm and professional as she offered him the position, explaining that he could start in 2 weeks to allow for a proper transition at his current job. $58,000 to start, she confirmed, with a review after 6 months. Health insurance kicks in on your first day, and there's a dental plan that should help with any family needs. After hanging up, Marcus stood in the break room for 5 full minutes, staring at his phone and trying to process that his life was about to change. No more overnight shifts, no more choosing between his mother's medication and the electric bill. For the first time since his father left, Marcus felt like he could breathe. His mother cried when he told her the news. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Diane said, wiping tears from her cheeks as they sat at the kitchen table. "You've worked so hard for this. You deserve every bit of good that's coming your way." "We deserve it, Mom. This isn't just about me." Marcus reached across and squeezed her hand. "The health insurance will cover your prescriptions completely. No more co-pays, no more rationing your medication when money's tight." That evening, Marcus walked through their neighborhood with a lightness in his step that he hadn't felt in years. The late November air was crisp, and the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on. He found himself noticing things he'd been too exhausted to see before. The way Mrs. Patterson had painted her front porch a cheerful yellow, the new playground equipment at the elementary school, the small signs of hope and renewal that had always been there but had been obscured by his constant worry about money. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice the mail truck pulling away from the duplex next door. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were an elderly couple who traveled frequently to visit their grandchildren, and their mailbox was overflowing with accumulated mail. Marcus was about to walk past when something caught his eye. Sticking out from under a stack of catalogs and bills was an envelope with his name on it, not his address. His name, but the Johnsons' address. Curious, he knocked on the Johnsons' door. Mrs. Johnson answered, a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and a perpetual apron. "Marcus, honey, how are you? We just got back from visiting our daughter in Phoenix." "I'm doing well, Mrs. Johnson. Actually, I think you might have gotten some of my mail by mistake." He pointed to the envelope. "That one there has my name on it." Mrs. Johnson squinted at the mail stack and pulled out the envelope. "Oh my, you're right. How strange." She handed it to him. "The Postal Service has been making more mistakes lately. Just last week we got mail for the people 3 blocks over." Marcus thanked her and walked home, examining the envelope as he went. It was from Michigan State University, and the return address indicated it was from the Financial Aid Office. That was odd. Marcus had never applied to Michigan State. He'd done his associate degree at the local community college because it was all he could afford. Back in his room, Marcus opened the envelope and found a letter dated 3 weeks earlier. "Dear Mr. Thompson, we are writing to follow up on the scholarship application you submitted for our adult learner program. Unfortunately, we have not received the required documentation to complete your application for the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship for non-traditional students. This scholarship provides full tuition coverage, plus a monthly stipend for living expenses, specifically designed for adult students who have demonstrated exceptional character while overcoming financial hardships. Your application essay was particularly compelling, and several members of our committee were moved by your story of caring for your mother while working multiple jobs to make ends meet. However, without the required transcripts and recommendation letters, we cannot process your application. The deadline for submission was October 15th, which has now passed. We encourage you to reapply next year if you are still interested in pursuing your bachelor's degree. Sincerely, Dr. Patricia Reeves, Director of Financial Aid." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his confusion growing with each reading. He had never submitted an application to Michigan State. He had never even heard of the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship. Someone had applied on his behalf and apparently written an essay about his personal life. But who? And more importantly, why hadn't he received this letter? If it had been delivered to his correct address 3 weeks ago, he might have been able to provide the missing documentation before the deadline. The next morning, Marcus decided to call Michigan State directly. Dr. Reeves was in a meeting, but her assistant was able to pull up his file. "Mr. Thompson, I see here that your application was submitted online on September 20th. The email address on file is..." She rattled off an email address that Marcus didn't recognize. "Is that correct?" "No, that's not my email," Marcus said. "Can you tell me what other contact information you have?" "Let me see. Phone number is 313-555-7294, and the mailing address is 1247 Maple Street, Detroit, Michigan." Marcus felt his blood run cold. The phone number was his mother's cell phone. The address was the Johnsons' house next door, close enough that someone might claim it was a mistake, but different enough that mail wouldn't be delivered to his actual address. "Mom, can you tell me when this application was submitted? What time of day?" "Let me check the system logs. It shows 2:17 p.m. on September 20th. Marcus thanked her and hung up, his mind racing. September 20th was a Tuesday. He would have been at work at the accounting firm. His mother would have been home alone, as she was most afternoons. That evening, Marcus sat in his car outside his house for 20 minutes, trying to figure out how to approach the conversation with his mother. There had to be an explanation. Maybe she had applied on his behalf as a surprise, and something had gone wrong with the mail delivery. Maybe she had used a different email address because she wasn't sure about his current one. But even as he tried to rationalize it, Marcus felt a growing sense of unease. Why would she use the neighbor's address? Why wouldn't she tell him about applying for a scholarship that could have changed his life? When he finally went inside, his mother was in the living room watching her evening shows. She looked up with a smile that seemed just a little too bright. "How was work, honey?" "Fine." Marcus sat down on the couch, the Michigan State letter folded in his pocket. "Mom, I need to ask you about something." "Of course. What is it?" Marcus pulled out the letter and handed it to her. This was delivered to the Johnsons' house by mistake. It's addressed to me, but I never applied to Michigan State. He watched his mother's face carefully as she read the letter. Her expression went through several changes: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been guilt. "I don't understand," Diane said finally. "Why would they send you this if you didn't apply?" "That's what I was wondering." Marcus kept his voice calm. "I called them today. The application was submitted from your phone number, Mom, and they used the Johnsons' address instead of ours." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Marcus could hear the tick of the kitchen clock and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. "Marcus," his mother said slowly, "I can explain." "I'm listening." Diane set the letter down on the coffee table and looked at her hands. "I did apply for you. I thought it would be a wonderful surprise if you got the scholarship. You've always been so smart, and you never got the chance to finish college because you were taking care of me." "Okay," Marcus said, though something in her tone didn't ring true. "But why didn't you tell me about it? And why did you use the wrong address?" "I wanted it to be a surprise," she repeated. "And I made a mistake with the address. I was nervous about filling out the application, and I mixed up the numbers." Marcus studied his mother's face. She was lying. He could tell by the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, the way her voice had gotten slightly higher. But why would she lie about trying to help him? "Mom, they needed transcripts and recommendation letters. The deadline was October 15th. If you had told me about this, I could have provided those documents." I know. "I'm sorry, baby. I thought they would contact you directly if they needed more information." That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that his mother wasn't telling him the whole truth. The story didn't add up. Why use a different email address? Why use the neighbor's address by mistake? And why did she seem so uncomfortable talking about it? The next day, Marcus decided to do some investigating on his own. He created the email address that Michigan State had on file, the one his mother had supposedly set up for his application, and tried to log into it. To his surprise, the account existed, and the password was his mother's maiden name combined with his birth year. The inbox contained dozens of emails, spanning back over 2 years. As Marcus scrolled through them, his hands began to shake. There were emails from colleges and universities, scholarship foundations, job placement services, and professional networking organizations, all addressed to him, all offering opportunities he had never heard about. A full scholarship to Wayne State University, denied because he never responded to their follow-up requests. A paid internship at a tech startup, expired because he never confirmed his interest. An invitation to join a mentorship program for low-income students pursuing careers in technology, cancelled due to lack of response. Email after email after email, representing years of opportunities that could have changed his life. Opportunities that someone had been systematically hiding from him. At the bottom of each email thread, Marcus found responses sent from this secret account, responses declining opportunities, making excuses, or simply ignoring offers until they expired. The tone of the responses was polite but dismissive, often mentioning family obligations or lack of interest in pursuing advancement. One email thread made Marcus's blood run cold. It was from a woman named Jennifer Martinez from the United Way, dated 8 months earlier. "Dear Marcus, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the scholarship opportunities available through our partnership with local colleges. You seemed very interested when we met at the community center, and I've identified several programs that would be perfect for your situation. The deadline for the Michigan Community Foundation Scholarship is approaching, and based on what you told me about your family situation and your work ethic, I think you'd be a strong candidate." The response, sent from his mother's phone using the fake email account, was devastating. "Dear Ms. Martinez, thank you for thinking of me, but I've decided I'm not interested in pursuing further education at this time. My family responsibilities are too demanding, and I don't think I'm cut out for college anyway. Please don't contact me about this again. Sincerely, Marcus Thompson. Marcus remembered meeting Jennifer Martinez. It had been at a job fair at the community center, and she had been enthusiastic about helping him find opportunities for advancement. When she never followed up, he had assumed she was just being polite and had forgotten about him. Now, he knew the truth. She had followed up repeatedly, and someone had been responding on his behalf, systematically declining every opportunity she presented. As Marcus continued reading through the emails, a pattern emerged. Someone had been monitoring his online presence, intercepting communications, and actively sabotaging his chances for advancement. They had been doing it for years, carefully and methodically, ensuring that he remained trapped in his cycle of low-paying jobs and financial struggle. The only person who had access to his personal information, who knew his daily schedule well enough to intercept mail and emails, who had both the motive and the opportunity to do this, was the person he trusted most in the world, his mother. But why? Why would the woman who claimed to be proud of him, who said she wanted nothing more than to see him succeed, be the one systematically destroying his chances at a better life? The answer, when it finally came, would be more heartbreaking than Marcus could have imagined. And it would come from an unexpected source, a conversation that would reveal not just the depth of his mother's deception, but the twisted logic behind years of sabotage that had been disguised as love. Marcus didn't confront his mother immediately. Instead, he spent the next week gathering evidence, following email trails, and trying to understand the full scope of what had been done to him. What he discovered was worse than he had imagined. His mother hadn't just intercepted a few opportunities. She had been systematically monitoring and sabotaging his advancement for over 5 years. She had set up multiple email accounts using variations of his name, intercepted phone calls by claiming to be his secretary when he wasn't home, and even gone so far as to contact organizations directly to withdraw his applications for various programs. The most devastating discovery came when Marcus called the Detroit Public Library, where his mother worked part-time. He asked to speak with Margaret Collins, the head librarian, claiming he needed to verify his mother's employment for insurance purposes. "Your mother is such a dedicated employee," Margaret said warmly, "and she talks about you constantly. She's so proud of how you take care of her, how devoted you are to the family. She always says she doesn't know what she'd do without you." "She's mentioned me at work?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected where this was going. "Oh, all the time. Just last month, she was telling us about how some organization tried to recruit you for some fancy program, but you turned it down because you didn't want to leave her alone. She said you told them that family comes first, and that you weren't interested in advancing your career if it meant being away from home more." Marcus felt sick. "Did she mention which organization?" "I think it was something with Michigan in the name, a mentorship program or scholarship. She was so touched that you chose her over your own opportunities. We all were. It's rare to see such devotion in young people these days." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his car outside the library, watching his mother through the windows as she helped patrons and shelved books. She looked so normal, so loving, so much like the woman who had raised him and sacrificed for him. But now he saw her differently, saw the careful calculation behind every smile, every expression of pride, every moment of manufactured helplessness. That evening, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't continue living this way, pretending everything was normal while knowing the truth. But he also couldn't confront his mother without understanding why she had done this to him. The answer came from an unexpected source. On Saturday morning, Marcus was cleaning out his closet, preparing for his new job, when he found a box of his father's old things that his mother had asked him to store. Inside, beneath old work shirts and a few tools, he found a letter addressed to him in his father's handwriting. The postmark was from 3 years ago. "Son, I know I have no right to contact you after all these years, and I know your mother probably never told you I've been trying to reach out. I've written dozens of letters, called the house when I knew you'd be home, even tried to visit once, but Diane made it clear I wasn't welcome. I don't expect forgiveness for leaving the way I did. I was a coward, and my gambling addiction had destroyed everything I touched. I thought leaving would give you and your mother a chance at a better life without my problems dragging you down. But I need you to know that I never stopped caring about you, and I never stopped trying to help from a distance. I've been clean for 4 years now, working steady construction jobs in Cleveland. I've been sending money when I could, not much, but something to help with your mother's medical bills. I set up a savings account in your name with my life insurance policy as the beneficiary. There's about $8,000 in it now. I also want you to know that I've been trying to help you with opportunities. I have a friend who works at Ford, another who's connected with some scholarship programs. I've put in good words for you whenever I could, sent your information to people who might be able to help. Your mother doesn't know about most of this. She made me promise to stay out of your lives, and I've mostly respected that. But I couldn't stand by and do nothing while you worked yourself to death, taking care of everyone but yourself. I hope someday you'll give me a chance to explain everything in person. I hope someday you'll let me be part of your life again, even in a small way. I'm proud of the man you've become. You're everything I failed to be. Love, Dad. P.S. If you ever want to contact me, I'm at the address on the envelope. I check my mail every day, hoping. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking more with each reading. His father had been trying to help him for years. His father had been sending money that Marcus had never seen. His father had been creating opportunities that had been systematically blocked, and his mother had hidden all of it. That evening, Marcus finally confronted her. "Mom, we need to talk." Diane was in the kitchen making dinner, humming softly to herself as she stirred a pot of soup. She looked up with the same loving smile she'd given him for 28 years. "Of course, baby. What's on your mind?" Marcus placed the Michigan State letter on the counter, followed by printouts of the intercepted emails, and finally, his father's letter. "I know what you've been doing," he said quietly. The transformation in his mother's face was immediate and devastating. The loving smile cracked and fell away, replaced by something Marcus had never seen before, a mixture of fear, anger, and what looked almost like hatred. "Marcus, I can explain." "No." His voice was firmer than he'd ever used with her. "You've been lying to me for years. You've been sabotaging every opportunity I've had to build a better life. You've been intercepting letters from Dad, hiding money he sent, declining scholarships and job opportunities on my behalf." His voice broke slightly. "Why, Mom? Why would you do this to me?" Diane's hands were shaking as she turned off the stove. For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was small and desperate. "Because I was scared of losing you." "What?" "I was scared that if you got a good job, if you went to college, if you built a real life for yourself, you'd leave me." Tears were streaming down her cheeks now. "Just like your father left, just like everyone always leaves." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "So you sabotaged my entire life to keep me trapped here?" "I didn't think of it as sabotage," Diane said, her voice getting defensive. "I thought of it as keeping our family together. You're all I have, Marcus. You're the only good thing that came out of my marriage to your father. If you left, if you moved on with your life, what would happen to me? You would have been fine, Mom. You would have been proud of me. You would have visited me in my new apartment, met my girlfriend when I finally had time to date someone, maybe even had grandchildren someday." Marcus felt tears on his own cheeks now. "Instead, you kept me here like a prisoner, working myself to death to pay for a life that you made sure would never get better." "I never meant to hurt you," Diane whispered. I couldn't lose you too." "But you did lose me," Marcus said softly. "You lost me the day you decided that your fear was more important than my future." The next week was the hardest of Marcus's life. He started his new job at Meridian Technologies, throwing himself into the work with a desperate intensity that his new colleagues attributed to enthusiasm. But that was really a way of avoiding thinking about the wreckage of his home life. Sarah Chen was as supportive as she'd promised to be, and Marcus found himself thriving in an environment where his intelligence and work ethic were valued rather than taken for granted. His cubicle had a window view, he had his own computer, and for the first time in years, he looked forward to going to work. But every evening he returned to a house that felt like a stage set for a play he no longer wanted to perform. His mother tried to act normal, tried to pretend that nothing had changed, but the air between them was thick with unspoken recriminations and broken trust. "How was work today?" she'd ask. The same question she'd asked for years. "Fine," he'd answer, the same response he'd always given, but now it felt like they were actors who had forgotten their lines. 2 weeks into his new job, Marcus made a decision. He called the number on his father's letter. "Hello?" The voice was older, rougher than Marcus remembered, but unmistakably his father's. "Dad, it's Marcus." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Marcus wondered if the call had been dropped. Then he heard a sound that might have been a sob. "Marcus, oh God, Marcus, I can't believe, I never thought." David Thompson cleared his throat. "How did you get this number?" "I found your letter, the one you sent 3 years ago. Mom had hidden it." Another long silence. "She told you about the letters, the money?" "She didn't tell me. I found out." Marcus explained about the Michigan State letter, the intercepted emails, the years of sabotage disguised as love. "Jesus," his father breathed. "I knew she was protective, but I never imagined—" "Marcus, I'm so sorry. If I had known, I would have fought harder to reach you." "I know, Dad. I read your letter. You've been trying to help me for years." "I have a lot to make up for," David said. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you be willing to meet? Maybe grab coffee somewhere?" Marcus looked around the house he'd lived in his entire life, at the photos on the wall showing a happy family that had never really existed, at the woman in the kitchen who had loved him enough to destroy his chances at happiness. "Yes," he said, "I'd like that." They met the following Saturday at a diner in downtown Detroit, neutral territory where neither of them had history. Marcus arrived first and sat in a booth by the window, watching the street and trying to prepare himself for seeing his father after 11 years. When David Thompson walked through the door, Marcus was surprised by how much older he looked. His father had always been a big man, but now he seemed smaller, grayer, worn down by years of manual labor and regret. But his eyes, when they met Marcus's across the restaurant, were clear and sober in a way Marcus didn't remember from his childhood. "You look good, son," David said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Grown up, successful." "I just started a new job," Marcus said, unsure how to navigate this conversation. "Data analyst at a tech company." "That's wonderful. I always knew you were smart. Smarter than your old man ever was." David paused, studying Marcus's face. "You have questions? Ask them. Why did you leave the way you did? Why didn't you try to contact me before now?" David was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with hands that shook slightly. "I was a gambling addict. I'm a gambling addict. You never stop being one. You just stop acting on it. By the time I left, I owed money to some very dangerous people. Staying would have put you and your mother in danger. You could have explained that. You could have gotten help. I should have. But I was ashamed and I was a coward, and I convinced myself that you'd be better off without me." David looked up at Marcus. "I was wrong about a lot of things, but I wasn't wrong about that. You did better without me. Maybe. But I would have done better with you clean and sober than I did with Mom sabotaging every opportunity I ever had." They talked for 3 hours, filling in 11 years of missed time. David told Marcus about his recovery, about the construction jobs that had given him purpose and stability, about the small apartment in Cleveland where he lived alone and thought about his son every day. Marcus told his father about the sleepless nights, the 2 jobs, the constant worry about money and his mother's health. He told him about discovering Meridian Technologies, about finding the intercepted emails, about the heartbreak of realizing that the person he'd sacrificed everything for had been the architect of his suffering. "What are you going to do?" David asked as they prepared to leave. Marcus had been thinking about that question for weeks. I'm going to move out. I found an apartment near my new job. I can afford it now with the salary increase. And your mother? I don't know, Dad. I can't keep living my life for someone who was willing to destroy my future to keep me close. But I also can't abandon her completely. She's still my mother, even if she... Marcus trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Even if she broke your trust, David said gently. Even if she hurt you in ways that will take years to heal. They exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet again in 2 weeks. As Marcus drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope for his own future. That evening, Marcus sat his mother down in the living room and told her about his plans to move out. You don't have to do this, Diane said, tears streaming down her face. We can work this out. We can go back to the way things were. No, Mom, we can't, because the way things were was built on lies. Marcus kept his voice gentle but firm. I'm not abandoning you. I'll help you with the medical bills. I'll visit regularly. I'll make sure you're okay. But I can't live here anymore, pretending that what you did was okay. I was just trying to keep our family together, she whispered. Our family was never together, Mom. It was just you holding me hostage with guilt and manufactured crises. Marcus stood up, feeling older than his 28 years. I'm going to have a relationship with Dad. I'm going to build a life for myself. And someday, maybe, we can have a real relationship too. But it has to be based on honesty, not on your fear of being alone. Marcus moved out 3 weeks later. His new apartment was small but bright, with windows that faced east so he could watch the sunrise over the Detroit River. For the first time in his adult life, he came home from work and didn't have to worry about anyone else's needs, anyone else's medication schedule, anyone else's emotional state. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. 6 months later, Marcus was promoted to senior data analyst at Meridian Technologies. He had started dating a woman named Rebecca, who worked in the marketing department. Their first date had been coffee after work, the kind of simple pleasure he'd never had time for before. He spoke with his father every week, slowly building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. David had moved back to Detroit and was working as a supervisor at a construction company, 5 years sober and counting. His relationship with his mother was more complicated. She had started therapy, finally beginning to address the abandonment issues and codependency that had driven her to sabotage her son's life. Their weekly dinners were stilted but civil, both of them trying to figure out how to love each other without the toxic dynamics that had defined their relationship for so long. One evening in late spring, as Marcus was walking home from work through the revitalized downtown district, his phone rang. It was Sarah Chen. Marcus, I hope you don't mind me calling after hours, but I wanted to let you know about an opportunity. The University of Michigan has a new partnership program with tech companies, allowing working professionals to complete their bachelor's degrees part-time with full tuition reimbursement. Marcus stopped walking, his heart racing. That sounds amazing. I thought you might be interested. The program is designed for people like you, smart, dedicated, but who never got the chance to finish their education because of life circumstances. Sarah paused. I've already spoken with the program director. If you're interested, they'd love to meet with you next week. After hanging up, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, watching the city come alive around him. Young professionals were heading to restaurants and bars. Couples were walking hand in hand. Along the riverfront and everywhere he looked, people were living the kinds of lives he'd only dreamed about. For the first time, those dreams felt achievable. That weekend, Marcus met his father for their usual Saturday breakfast. As they sat in their regular booth, David noticed something different about his son. You look happy, David observed. Really happy. I am, Marcus said, and realized it was true. I got offered a chance to go back to school, finish my bachelor's degree. That's wonderful, son. Are you going to take it? Marcus thought about all the opportunities that had been stolen from him, all the years of struggle that could have been avoided, all the dreams that had been deferred by someone who claimed to love him. Yes, he said firmly. "I'm going to take it, and this time nobody's going to stop me." As they left the diner, David put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, the first physical contact they'd had since he'd returned to Detroit. "I'm proud of you," David said. "Not just for what you've accomplished, but for how you've handled everything, for finding a way to forgive, even when forgiveness seemed impossible." Marcus looked at his father, this man who had abandoned him but had never stopped trying to help him from a distance, and then thought about his mother who had stayed but had systematically destroyed his chances at independence. "I'm learning that love isn't about holding on," Marcus said. "It's about letting go." 6 months later, Marcus was sitting in his first college class in over a decade, surrounded by other working adults who had found their way back to education despite the obstacles life had thrown at them. As the professor talked about data science and statistical analysis, Marcus felt a familiar excitement, the same feeling he'd had as a teenager when he'd first discovered computers, before life had gotten complicated, before survival had become more important than dreams. After class, he walked to his car and found a text message from Rebecca. "How was your first day back? Dinner to celebrate." Another message from his father. "Thinking about you today. Call me when you get a chance." And surprisingly, a message from his mother. "I know today was your first day of classes. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry it took so long for you to get this chance. I love you." Marcus sat in his car for a moment, looking at the messages, thinking about the long road that had brought him to this point. The betrayal still hurt, probably always would. The lost years still felt like a wound that was healing, but would leave scars. But for the first time in his adult life, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because someone else had decided what was best for him, not because guilt or obligation had trapped him in place, but because he had chosen this path for himself. As he drove home through the Detroit streets where he'd grown up, where he'd struggled, where he'd finally learned to distinguish between love and control, Marcus allowed himself to believe in something he'd almost given up on, the possibility that his best years were still ahead of him. The woman at Meridian had been right. All those months ago when she told him mysteriously that someone believed he deserved help. He did deserve help. He deserved opportunities. He deserved a life built on his own choices rather than someone else's fears. And finally, at 29 years old, Marcus Thompson was ready to claim that life for himself. The future stretched ahead of him, uncertain but full of possibility, and for the first time in years, Marcus was excited to see what came next. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the conference room on the 15th floor of the Meridian Technologies building, looking out at the Detroit skyline as he prepared for the biggest presentation of his career. The city looked different from this height. Cleaner, more hopeful, full of cranes and construction sites that spoke of renewal and growth. It reminded him of his own transformation. "You ready for this?" Rebecca asked, entering the room with a stack of presentation materials. She was wearing the navy blue dress he'd bought her for her birthday, and her engagement ring, a modest but beautiful solitaire they'd picked out together 3 months ago, caught the afternoon light. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, straightening his tie. It was a far cry from the second-hand ties he used to wear to job interviews. This one was silk, purchased with money he'd earned through merit and hard work rather than desperation. The presentation was for Meridian's new Community Outreach Initiative, a program Marcus had proposed to provide technology training and mentorship to underserved communities throughout Detroit. The idea had grown out of his own experiences, all those missed opportunities, all those years of struggle that could have been alleviated with the right guidance and support. "The board is very excited about this," Rebecca said, organizing the handouts. "Sarah told me that the CEO specifically requested to be here for your presentation." Marcus nodded. Though his stomach was churning with nerves, he'd come so far from the exhausted gas station clerk who used to fall asleep standing up, but moments like this still felt surreal. Sometimes he had to remind himself that he belonged in rooms like this, that his ideas had value, that he wasn't an imposter who might be found out at any moment. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. Good luck today, son. You're going to do great. I'm proud of you no matter what happens. Another text came in immediately after, this one from his mother. I know today is important for you. I'll be thinking about you. I love you, Marcus. The relationship with his mother had evolved slowly over the past 2 years. The weekly dinners had become monthly, then moved to coffee dates that felt less charged with history and expectation. Diane had made genuine progress in therapy, working through the abandonment issues that had driven her to sabotage her son's life. She'd even started volunteering at a literacy program for adults, channeling her need to feel needed into something constructive rather than destructive. It wasn't the relationship Marcus had imagined having with his mother, but it was honest in a way their previous dynamic had never been. She still struggled with boundaries, still sometimes slipped into old patterns of guilt and manipulation, but now Marcus could recognize those moments and respond with compassion rather than compliance. The conference room began to fill with Meridian's executive team. Sarah Chen took a seat in the front row and gave Marcus an encouraging smile. She'd been more than just a boss over the past 2 years. She'd become a mentor and advocate, helping Marcus navigate the corporate world and recognize his own worth. "Ladies and gentlemen," said James Morrison, Meridian's CEO, as he entered the room. Morrison was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from decades of successful leadership. "I'm excited to hear about this community initiative that's been generating so much buzz." Marcus took a deep breath and clicked to the first slide of his presentation. The title read, "Building Bridges, a technology mentorship program for Detroit's underserved communities." 2.5 years ago, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I had dreams of a career in technology, but I didn't know how to access the opportunities that could make those dreams reality. I was trapped in a cycle of survival that left no room for growth or advancement." He clicked to the next slide, which showed statistics about unemployment and underemployment in Detroit's most disadvantaged neighborhoods. "There are thousands of people in our city facing the same challenges I faced. Bright, motivated individuals who could contribute significantly to Detroit's tech renaissance, but who lack the connections, resources, and guidance needed to break into the industry." As Marcus continued his presentation, laying out his vision for a comprehensive mentorship program that would pair Meridian employees with community members seeking to enter the tech field, he thought about all the people who had helped him along the way. Ashley Williams, who had vouched for him when she saw his resume. Sarah Chen, who had taken a chance on someone without a traditional background. His father, who had tried to create opportunities from a distance. Even Jennifer Martinez from the United Way, who had persisted in trying to help despite the sabotage she didn't know about. The program would have 3 phases, Marcus explained, clicking through detailed slides that showed curriculum outlines, partnership, agreements with local community colleges, and projected outcomes. Phase 1 would be basic computer literacy and professional development. Phase 2 would focus on specific technical skills training. Phase 3 would be direct mentorship and job placement assistance. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of time commitment are we talking about for our employees who volunteer as mentors?" 4 hours per month initially, with the option to increase involvement based on the mentors' availability and interest. We'd provide training for all mentors and pair them with participants based on career goals and personality compatibility. The questions came rapidly after that. How would they measure success? What was the projected cost? How would they recruit participants? Marcus had answers for all of them, the result of months of research and planning he'd done during his lunch breaks and weekends. "I have to ask," said Patricia Williams, the Chief Financial Officer, "what inspired you to develop such a comprehensive program? This goes well beyond typical corporate community service initiatives." Marcus paused, thinking about how to answer honestly without making the presentation about his personal story. "I know what it's like to have potential, but no pathway," he said finally. I know what it's like to be told you're not qualified for opportunities you could excel at if someone just gave you a chance. This program isn't charity, it's investment. We're not just helping individuals, we're helping to build the workforce Detroit needs to compete in the technology sector. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Morrison stood up, shaking his head with what looked like amazement. Marcus, this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking initiative that sets Meridian apart from our competitors. I want to see a budget proposal and implementation timeline on my desk by Friday. As the executives filed out of the room, chatting excitedly about the program's potential, Sarah Chen approached Marcus with a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "That was incredible," she said. "You've just changed the trajectory of this company's community involvement for years to come." "I couldn't have done it without your support," Marcus replied. 2 years ago, I was afraid to speak up in team meetings. Now I'm presenting to the board. "That growth was all you," Sarah said. "I just provided the platform." That evening, Marcus and Rebecca celebrated at their favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in Corktown that had become their spot over the months they'd been dating. The engagement ring still felt new and exciting on her finger, and they spent most of dinner talking about wedding plans and the community program. "I have an idea," Rebecca said as they shared tiramisu for dessert. "What if we made the mentorship program part of our wedding somehow? Like asking guests to make donations instead of giving traditional gifts?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you," he said simply. "Not just for ideas like that, but for understanding why this matters to me." "Of course it matters," Rebecca said. "It's who you are. You've never forgotten where you came from, even as you've built this new life." Later that night, as they walked along the Detroit Riverwalk, Marcus's phone rang. He was surprised to see his mother's name on the caller ID. "Marcus, I hope I'm not calling too late." "No, Mom, it's fine." "What's up?" "I just wanted to tell you that Mrs. Rodriguez came by the library today. She said she heard through the neighborhood that you gave some big presentation at work today. Something about helping people get better jobs." Marcus smiled. The Detroit neighborhoods were small worlds where news traveled fast. "Yeah, I presented a community outreach program to my company's board. They approved it." "I'm so proud of you, baby," Diane said, and Marcus could hear the emotion in her voice. I know I made mistakes that made things harder for you, but seeing what you've accomplished, knowing that you're using your success to help other people, it makes me feel like maybe I raised you right in some ways." It was the closest his mother had come to directly acknowledging the harm she'd caused, and Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "You did raise me right in the ways that mattered most, Mom. You taught me to work hard, to care about other people, to never give up. Those lessons stuck even when other things went wrong. I love you, Marcus, and I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need to keep saying it until you believe it." "I believe it, Mom, and I love you too." After hanging up, Marcus and Rebecca continued their walk in comfortable silence. The Detroit River reflected the lights of the city and the neighboring Windsor skyline, creating a scene of surprising beauty in a place that had once been written off as beyond saving. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said as they stopped at a bench overlooking the water. "Of course. Do you ever regret the way things happened? I mean, you lost so many years to those missed opportunities. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if your mother hadn't, if things had been different?" Marcus considered the question. It was something he'd thought about often, especially in the early days after discovering the truth about his mother's sabotage. "I used to," he said honestly. "I used to lie awake at night thinking about all the scholarships I never got, all the jobs I never applied for, all the years I spent exhausted and struggling. But lately I've started to think that maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to. How do you figure? If I'd gotten that Wayne State scholarship when I was 22, I might have become a different person, maybe more entitled, maybe less empathetic. The Marcus who got this job at Meridian, who thought to create this mentorship program, who values the people in his life the way I value you and Dad, and even Mom. That Marcus only exists because of the struggles, Rebecca leaned against his shoulder. That's a very mature way to look at it. Don't give me too much credit. I still have bad days where I'm angry about the time I lost. But I'm learning that resentment is just another kind of prison. I spent too many years trapped by circumstances I couldn't control. I don't want to spend any more years trapped by anger about circumstances I can't change. 3 months later, the Meridian Community Bridge Program held its first orientation session. Marcus stood in front of 30 adults ranging in age from 19 to 55, all of whom had been selected from over 200 applicants for the pilot program. The group was diverse in every way. Single mothers looking to transition into higher-paying careers, veterans seeking civilian employment, former factory workers whose industries had moved overseas, recent immigrants with engineering degrees that weren't recognized in the United States. What they all had in common was determination and a willingness to invest in their own futures. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he began, "and 3 years ago, I was working 2 jobs just to pay my bills. I thought opportunities like this didn't exist for people like me. I thought I'd missed my chance to build a real career." He looked around the room at the faces staring back at him, hopeful, skeptical, desperate, determined. "I was wrong," Marcus continued. "Opportunities exist, but sometimes we need help finding them, accessing them, and believing we deserve them. That's what this program is about. Not charity, not pity, but partnership. You're here because you have potential. My job, and the job of everyone at Meridian who's volunteering as a mentor, is to help you realize that potential." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into the program with the same intensity he'd once brought to working 2 jobs. He arrived early and stayed late, checking in with participants, troubleshooting technical issues, and connecting people with resources they needed. One evening, as he was leaving the community center where they held the training sessions, Marcus was approached by a young woman named Keisha, who reminded him of himself at that age. Brilliant but beaten down by circumstances, hungry for opportunity, but unsure how to find it. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "And call me Marcus. How do you know this is going to work? How do you know we're not just wasting our time?" It was a fair question, one that Marcus had asked himself during his darkest moments. "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't guarantee that this program will change your life, but I can guarantee that if you don't try, if you don't take advantage of this opportunity, nothing will change. And I can tell you that the worst thing that can happen is that you'll learn some new skills and meet some people who believe in your potential." Keisha nodded, but Marcus could see she wasn't entirely convinced. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus continued. "When I got my job at Meridian, I was convinced I was going to fail. I was convinced they'd figure out I didn't belong there and send me back to working nights at a gas station. But I showed up anyway, every day, and I did the work. And gradually, I stopped feeling like an imposter and started feeling like someone who belonged. What if I'm not smart enough?" Keisha asked quietly. "Smart enough for what? To learn, to grow, to deserve a chance at a better life?" Marcus shook his head. "Keisha, you're here. You applied for this program, you were selected out of 200 applicants, and you're showing up even though you're scared. That tells me everything I need to know about how smart you are." 6 months later, Keisha was hired as a junior web developer at a startup in downtown Detroit. She was one of 23 program participants who found employment in the tech sector within a year of completing the program. The success rate was high enough that Meridian decided to expand the program to serve 100 participants annually. Marcus was promoted to Director of Community Partnerships, a newly created position that allowed him to focus full-time on building bridges between Meridian and the communities they served. His salary had doubled since his gas station days, and he'd completed his bachelor's degree in information systems with a 3.8 GPA. But the success that meant the most to him was measured in stories like Keisha's. in the way the program participants carried themselves with increasing confidence as the weeks passed, in the thank you emails he received from people whose lives had changed trajectory because someone had believed in their potential. 1 year after the program's launch, Marcus received an unexpected phone call at work. "Is this Marcus Thompson?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, this is Marcus. My name is David Chen. I'm a reporter with the Detroit Free Press. I'm working on a story about corporate community partnerships, and your program at Meridian keeps coming up as a model for how to do this kind of work effectively. Would you be willing to do an interview?" The article ran on the front page of the Sunday edition, with a photo of Marcus surrounded by program participants and graduates. The headline read, "From Gas Station to Boardroom, How One Man's Journey Inspired a Movement." The article traced Marcus's path from struggling to pay bills while working 2 jobs to creating a program that had placed dozens of people in technology careers. It quoted several program graduates, Meridian executives, and community leaders who praised the initiative's effectiveness. What the article didn't mention, because Marcus hadn't shared it, was the role his mother's sabotage had played in his journey. He'd made peace with that part of his story, but it wasn't the part he wanted to define him publicly. The morning the article came out, Marcus's phone started ringing early. Job offers from other companies who wanted him to replicate the program, invitations to speak at conferences about corporate social responsibility, requests from other cities to consult on similar initiatives. But the call that meant the most came from his father. "I saw the article," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I saved 10 copies of the newspaper. I'm so proud of you, son. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become." "Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me." "Your mother called me this morning," David said carefully. Marcus's parents had been speaking occasionally over the past year, working through their own complicated history. "She wanted me to know how proud she is too." She's framed the article and put it on her mantle. Marcus smiled, thinking about his mother's small living room with its gallery of family photos. And now, apparently, a newspaper clipping celebrating the success of the son she'd once tried so hard to keep close. "How are things with her?" David asked. "Better. Different, but better. We're learning how to love each other without the dysfunction. It's slow, but it's real." That evening, Marcus and Rebecca hosted a celebration at their apartment for the program participants and mentors. The small space was packed with people laughing, sharing stories, and making connections that would last long after the formal program ended. As Marcus looked around the room, at Keisha showing off photos of her new apartment to her mentor, at a former auto worker named James discussing his startup idea with one of Meridian's senior developers, at his father deep in conversation with Rebecca about wedding planning, he felt a contentment that had nothing to do with recognition or career advancement. This was what success looked like. Not just personal achievement, but the ability to create opportunities for others. Not just climbing the ladder, but making sure the ladder was accessible to people who needed it most. Rebecca found him in the kitchen, where he was refilling the coffee pot. "How does it feel?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "How does what feel?" "Being the guy who changes people's lives for a living." Marcus leaned back against her, watching through the doorway as the party continued in their living room. "It feels like coming full circle," he said. "Like everything I went through, the struggle, the betrayal, the disappointment, it was all leading to this. To understanding what it means to help someone without trying to control them. To learning the difference between supporting someone and sabotaging them." "Your mother really did a number on you," Rebecca said gently. "She did. But she also taught me what not to do, how not to love someone. And in a weird way, that's been just as valuable as learning how to love someone the right way." Late that night, after the last guest had left and they'd finished cleaning up, Marcus sat at his laptop, responding to emails about the newspaper article. One email stood out from the rest, sent from an address he didn't recognize but with a subject line that made his heart race. "Thank you from a stranger. Dear Mr. Thompson, you don't know me, but my daughter Keisha Washington is one of your program participants. She's the single mother who was working at McDonald's before she started your technology training. I wanted you to know that you saved my daughter's life. Not literally, but in every way that matters. She had given up on herself, convinced that she was stuck in dead-end jobs forever because she never finished college. She was working 16-hour days just to pay rent and buy diapers for my grandson, and I watched her spirit break a little more each day. Then she heard about your program, and everything changed. Not just the job she got, though that new salary means she can afford to move to a safe neighborhood and maybe even save for my grandson's college fund. But more than that, she believes in herself again. She walks taller, dreams bigger, talks about the future like it's something to look forward to instead of something to fear. I don't know what motivated you to create this program, but I hope you know that you're doing God's work. You're giving people hope, and hope is the most powerful gift anyone can receive. My daughter tells me you understand what it's like to struggle, to feel like opportunities aren't meant for people like us. I don't know your story, but I know you're using whatever pain you experience to heal other people's pain. That's the mark of a truly good person. Thank you for seeing the potential in my daughter when she couldn't see it in herself. Thank you for creating something beautiful out of whatever brought you to this work. God bless you and your family. Sincerely, Dorothy Washington. Marcus read the email 3 times, tears blurring his vision. This was why he'd endured years of sleepless nights and financial stress. This was why he'd survived his mother's betrayal and his father's abandonment. This was why he'd kept pushing forward even when everything seemed hopeless. Not for his own success, though that was meaningful, but for moments like this, when his journey could become a bridge for someone else's transformation. He closed the laptop and went to bed, where Rebecca was already sleeping peacefully beside him. As he settled in next to the woman he would marry in 6 months, in the apartment he could afford, because he'd finally found work that utilized his talents, Marcus thought about the boy he'd been, exhausted, resentful, trapped by circumstances he couldn't control. That boy couldn't have imagined this life, but that boy's struggles had made this life possible. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give the world is to transform your pain into purpose, your obstacles into opportunities for others. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it completely. And tomorrow, he would wake up and continue the work of building bridges between past and future, between struggle and success, between the life he'd survived and the life he was still creating. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning.